Good Morning Liberty. Yeah!
Well, what is up, all of our liberty-loving friends? This is another fantastic episode of Good Morning Liberty. My name is Nate Thurston. Across from me is Mr. Charles Chuck Thompson. How's it going today, Chuck?
I'm doing like my autistic stem.
Yeah, okay.
Here.
That sounds good.
To the beat, though.
To the beat. You're on beat. Okay, to a great band called 3 Pill Morning.
I recognize that song.
Yeah, Charlie may or may not have been involved in that song at one point in time. You probably played it a billion times in your life.
We wrote that song with the guitar player from Hinder.
From Hinder?
Yeah.
How about that?
In his nice castle home in Oklahoma.
Did you ever call him?
Oklahoma.
Did you ever call him real late? At all?
No.
Okay.
No.
You'd be like, Charlie, why you calling me?
No,
I thought that might be cool. Okay, anyhow, this is Good Morning Liberty. We talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of meaning every single day of the week when we want to. So smash the follow button, subscribe, leave a rating on Spotify, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Watch the video now on Spotify.
Which seems to matter, by the way. We just saw in the live group here, Josh said that he found us on Spotify after he got sick of breaking points.
Ah, okay.
And so those ratings matter.
You went from breaking points
to liberty
to Good Morning Liberty. See, I listen to Breaking Points every day. It's one of my favorite shows. It's like my Oppo research that I do, only they're not crazy, wildly unhinged.
They're not
leftists,
cringe.
So I can still listen to them because they're fairly reasonable on a lot of topics.
Someone else found us on Spotify after Dave Smith.
Well, how about that?
Now they've joined the Fed Haters Club.
They are in the Fed Haters Club.
So y'all, this is real. You guys leaving those rating and reviews, it actually helps.
That's how.
At least 2 people have come.
So we've got proof. That's a big enough sample size from what I can tell.
Yeah.
We have plenty of proof.
That's as good as temperature data.
There we go. There we go. 1/100 millionth of the population. So anyhow, do all those things. And if you don't, we still love you, but we love the other people more. You can go to joingml.com and join for as little as $7 a month, like the fine folks on both sides. Some people are real libertarians who join for a lot more money, but it's like a lifetime thing, and they're real libertarians afterwards. Some people, they pay $7 a month or whatever the amount is.
Libertarian mask.
Yeah, but they're both fine people.
Yeah. But we do love the Fed Haters Club more.
Mm-hmm. Than other people, yeah.
And it's not because they give us money, but it's because they give us money.
It's basically, it's a bribery thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do. Okay, we've got this Trump immunity thing that we still have to talk about today because from what I've seen, I told Charlie this when he came in today, I haven't seen people on social media this worked up since the Roe versus Wade thing, since the Dobbs decision. And they might even be more worked up about this right now. I mean, it's annoying. It's very annoying.
More worked up than Chevron.
Way more worked up than Chevron. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is like the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of democracy.
Yeah.
What's going on right now. Now, we're libertarians, and we happen to think that every person in the government should be afraid to do anything at all times, including and up to leaving their house. We think that should be the case, okay?
But again, this is no different than the court's long-standing qualified immunity for police officers acting as official police officers.
True.
I mean,
that's true. Which we're also against.
Which we are.
Yeah.
We are against that. You should still be allowed to sue.
They made some good arguments in this opinion, which we'll go through today. I'll still overall disagree, but also at the same time, what we have to do that we always have to do is disagree really with the principle of the ruling, but also not go so far as to say that now all of a sudden we live under a dictatorship or we live under a king or the president's just going to murder all of their political opponents and the Supreme Court just said that that's fine and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We're not going to go
or presidents
so
are
far.
going to drone bomb American citizens in foreign countries.
That would never happen, and we all know that's completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
They would never put American citizens in internment camps based on their race. That would never happen ever in American history.
Yeah.
A president could never drop a bomb that incinerates hundreds of thousands of people in a civilian population
in a matter of seconds.
Yeah. It's just not something like you got to be reasonable about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you got to be able to say the word reasonable. But I happen to think this is a bad thing for Trump. And I think it's a good thing for Biden. Number one, no one's talking about the debate right now. No one's currently right now talking about Biden has to drop out because this is now the most important thing in the entire world.
As forgettable as yesterday's news.
What it did was so after the debate, one of our listeners and friends, Amanda, she said, well, what do you think the game plan is going to be now after this? I said, their only option is to pivot to how dangerous Trump is as the president. That is the only, if Biden is to stay in the race, their only option is to hammer home the idea that Trump is too dangerous to ever allow to be the president.
It's better
again.
for a dead guy.
Yes.
It's better to vote for a dead guy.
Yeah.
Than it is for Trump.
And this helps with that, this idea of immunity. Now, remember, it's immunity from criminal prosecution. It's not immunity from impeachment and removal from office. And it's immunity from criminal prosecution when you are still acting within your constitutional duties that the Constitution has laid out for you. So it's not quite as terrible as what everyone is saying it is. All right. I wanted to point out the fact that I'm still just saying the same thing that we said, or that I said back in February at least, and the fact that we were wrong about something. Both of us said that the Supreme Court was not going to grant Trump immunity and that they were not going to say that the president was immune from prosecution.
Well, we were partially wrong.
Yeah.
Because they said that he was granted immunity from official acts.
Yeah.
They
only gave him immunity on one specific thing.
And then they said
that
that presidents get presumptive immunity on unofficial acts.
Mm-hmm.
And then that they get no immunity essentially for anything else.
Here's a clip of what we said on February 29th, a day that we won't see again for another 4 years. Here we go. And then you get the trial back going again, and there's likely to not be any kind of verdict before you get to the election in November.
Unless they expedite that.
If I were like a Republican or Trump wanting to win the election in 2024, I would want them to rule that he does not have immunity. I think that is actually the best ruling for Trump. I know that seems counterintuitive here, but that will help whip up the base. If they rule that he has absolute immunity, that's going to stir up the Democrats.
So that's
going to make them more willing to come out and vote and all that because of this corrupt, Trump-appointed Supreme Court has ruled to give him immunity, and that's actually going to whip the vote for Democrats coming towards the election. Mm-hmm. What you actually want is for him to have a loss when it comes to this immunity to keep the right, the Republicans' base stirred up, and for the Democrats to feel like they just got some kind of a win, and for them to keep thinking that they can rely on these cases to try and take Trump down before the election. That's what you should want. This is actually best case scenario, like you said. Anyhow, that's what I knew that we had said that at one point in time. So I went back and found it today. I wanted to go through some of this. First off, just to state, this is what was held. This is the idea. Charlie, what did they hold?
All right. Under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. Basically, absolute immunity from criminal prosecution in his enumerated powers spelled out in the Constitution.
Yeah, yeah.
What it explicitly says in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts, meaning official acts of the president that aren't necessarily enumerated in the Constitution.
Yeah.
It's presumptive immunity. Doesn't mean that's immunity.
No.
It's just they're presumed to be immune unless something egregious takes place. And then even if it's an official act to get a BJ in the Oval Office, you could still be held on sexual assault charges.
Yeah.
And he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts.
So what they have to do now, remember, we'll talk about this more here in a bit, but
what would gay sex in the Senate chambers be considered?
I would say it's an official act, but it wasn't the president, so that's fine. Biden came out and gave a speech last night So, and it was fine because
He looks orange.
He did. I saw a lot of people saying that he looked orange.
He does.
Yeah. I thought
Put
orange
that picture up next to his debate picture.
I saw it. I saw plenty of side, but I know how. I'm not saying he isn't more orange than normal, but
Dude got a spray tan for sure.
But I know how much the coloring on specific cameras and the lighting in the room can change the complexion of a
that family
person's
meeting
face. Okay.
included a special spray tanner on
Oh,
Sunday.
definitely did. That's actually why they went to Camp David, because that's where Trump left behind the spray tanning machine. And they all got back there because it's way cheaper than going down to your local spray tan shop.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's way better deal if you go there.
Trump left it.
Here's some of Biden's speech, and we'll see what we all think about this.
The presidency is the most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that tests your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, you also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation. Nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor sent a violent mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. We all saw it with our own eyes. We sat there and watched it happen that day. Attack on the police, the ransacking at the Capitol, a mob literally hunting down the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, I can't stand this.
Gallows erected to hang the vice president.
What are your thoughts while this is happening?
God.
Tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, it's this like, it's the thing that actually butters my biscuits more than anything else, where you're given like partial truths, and then you create this wild reality around this partial truth. And maybe because I've personally experienced this, you know,
yeah. You've seen
which is
that,
why it really grinds my gears.
Yeah.
Where you can't just be authentically
to be clear, you
truthful.
said it buttered your biscuits, and I've always perceived that as a good thing. Because I
burned.
like
Sorry,
butter
burned. It
on
burned
my biscuits.
It burned my biscuits.
If you're like,
which is a real travesty.
The thing that really butters and puts honey on my biscuits is, I'm like, that sounds like a good thing to me.
Well, sorry, it burned.
It burns your
Yeah, it
biscuits.
burns
Your
my
biscuits are burning.
Which is a travesty.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
Okay.
If you have
I just
burnt biscuits.
I don't want to put out any...
Imagine you're cooking this wonderful breakfast, okay?
Yeah.
And you've got the sausage gravy is perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you see the smoke start to billow out of the oven, and you're like, oh no, my biscuits.
They're burning.
They're burning.
Yeah, you don't want that.
And you try to rescue them. And that's how I feel.
Man.
I just wanted to paint the picture.
I'm trying to put myself in that position right now.
So anyway, enough about the biscuits. What I'm trying to say is this partial truth, right?
Yeah.
Because you didn't see Biden come out and make a speech when the Supreme Court ruled a few years ago that police are, they're entitled to qualified immunity from civil prosecution or anything else. And they upheld that. You didn't see Biden say that was that put police officers above the law.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this whole Jan 6 mob thing, talking about how Trump sent them. We all saw it before our eyes. Yeah, we saw it, that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, we did see.
Yeah. And we saw the timeline. And then when they released all the footage we saw how some people were encouraged to come in.
Yeah.
And we saw how Capitol Police kind of walked around with the guy with the horns.
We've seen it with our own eyes.
Yeah.
We have.
And then let's forget about the 2020 mob riots where they actually burned buildings and people were killed. Lots more people were killed. They set police stations on fire and businesses on fire, and they looted and ransacked and everything else.
The problem is there's no insurance on the Capitol building. Can't cover it. So that's why it was so bad.
Yeah.
No insurance company would cover that.
And who was hunting Nancy Pelosi? Is this the most dangerous game? Is that what we were playing here?
Yeah, the hypocrisy of this whole thing is wild also because we really
and I say all this and I don't even like Trump.
I know.
But it makes me mad. Let's just talk about reality. I think Trump has enough bad stuff that's just true that you could just talk about that.
Well, the hypocrisy, the hypocritical, the gaslighting side of this is what's so infuriating. Because this guy comes out here and is talking to you about the limits of presidential powers and the danger of a president being able to do whatever he wants. And he says something like there's basically no limits to what a president can do. That's not what they said. They talked about criminal prosecution for official acts. You can still be impeached. And by the way, as Biden well knows, the judicial system can still block things that the president does because Biden has tried to unilaterally change the structure of America several times, like forcing people to get vaccinated with a brand new pharmaceutical product or get fired from their jobs.
Or forgiving student loan debt.
Or transferring student loan debt from the people who took it out to people who didn't take it out or that were even paying their own student loans still at the same time. Like I'd have to pay someone's student loan debt while I'm still paying my student loans because I have a private student loan. But then I still got to pay other people's student loan debt at the same time because he decided he's going to come out and do this. And guess what? Supreme Court said he couldn't do it. And then he went out on the campaign trail and said, yeah, guess what? I'm going to do it anyway. They said I couldn't do it and I'm just going to keep doing it. And everyone cheers. They're all cheering because he said he's going to ignore what the Supreme Court said was constitutional. And then he gets to come out here and do this.
Yeah.
Sorry. Got to take a breath.
I get it.
I
understand. Your anger is righteous.
Obama spied on American citizens. Clearly.
Yeah.
Clapper. Is it Clapper who went up there?
James Clapper.
Lied.
Mm-hmm.
Lied to Congress.
When he said not wittingly. And it was very much so wittingly.
Yes. They put people in Guantanamo Bay.
The person who exposed it is wanted for treason and has to live in Russia.
I'm looking for something to throw, but I need this water. I need this hard drive. Need the hard drive, the water.
Your glasses.
I need my glasses. So I need my glasses, the hard drive, the water.
You don't need that.
I don't need this. Fuck! What are these people doing? So it's the hypocrisy. It's the gaslighting that drives me freaking insane right now is that this guy's going to walk up here and act like he cares about the president having too much power.
And the rule of law.
The rule of law.
Yeah.
He was vice president for Obama, who drone bombed American citizen and accidentally killed a few people, in the process when doing that and spied on American citizens.
He was vice president when Obama's administration did the gun run
all that
south
stuff.
of the border that killed border agents.
They're trying to get the audio of his testimony and that the special counsel, her investigation, and he claimed executive privilege and won't give up the audio. Executive privilege is something that's discussed in these court documents of not having to give up your that specific evidence, and he's invoking it right now. They're threatening to put Merrick Garland in jail or hold him in contempt or whatever it is because they won't turn it over. And he's saying he's immune from that stuff. Everyone else has got to turn over that kind of stuff. And then come out here and give this prime time 4-minute 45-second speech about how no one's above the law,
which seems kind of weird, by the way, that you're running a campaign and you're president. And then you can go on primetime TV.
That was the first thing I thought about. Because
you can go on primetime TV to talk about your political opponent.
No, this speech is all about how we can't have Trump as president. This was a campaign speech.
From the White House.
From the White House. I don't know what the specific rules are on that, but this was a campaign speech. He talked about Trump several times and talked about how he would never abuse the office, and you need a good person in office because now it's just too dangerous. It was a campaign speech that he gave. I don't know what the rules are specifically. I don't know what the law is to it, but he's immune, so who cares?
This is an official speech.
Said. Yeah, he's like, oh, who cares? I can give this speech. It doesn't matter. So let's see. We already played that thing. This is a general idea that we're seeing go around right now. Massive post. I'm talking every single dumb A post about this is getting 50,
now the
15,
irony
20,
of this post is hilarious, by the way.
Go ahead.
Think about this, okay? So Vince tweets out, March 1933, the Enabling Act becomes law in Germany, given the chief executive power to enforce his own laws without checks and balances. The passing of the act marked the formal transition from democratic republic to totalitarian dictatorship. 6 months later, it was a one-party state. Decoding Fox News retweets this and says, the Nazis rose to power legally. Every mechanism they used to take complete control was within the laws of the Weimar Republic. Once they got total power, and they didn't give it up until millions were dead at their hands and parts of Germany were flattened. Now, what I find ironic about this is that the left was extremely upset that the court overturned Chevron, which gave the executive power to enforce its own laws without checks and balances.
There's definitely ironic and hypocritical parts about this.
The court overturned that precedent, saying, no.
Yeah.
The executive can't just write and interpret their own laws.
Yeah.
And force people to pay fines or fees or whatever it is. This needs to be up for
say they can't. It
judicial
says that they have
purview.
to go through a fair judicial review.
It needs to be up for judicial purview and we don't need to default to the reasonable interpretation of the agencies, which gives the executives way too much power. And then the same people who are upset about the court overturning, taking away executive power, are the ones who are going to talk about the Nazis having more executive power and basically say, well, this is what Trump is doing because now he just won on qualified immunity. It's so ridiculous.
The other part about
There's no consistency whatsoever. It's infuriating.
The other infuriating part about this is that these tweets, I saw this retweeted several times, and this post has like 20,000 retweets. The retweets of them get 10, 15,000 retweets within a few hours. And it's not even true that it's possible. This Enabling Act, if this were to become law in America, would get overturned by the Supreme Court for being unconstitutional. It would violate the separation of powers. It would violate checks and balances. Nothing the Supreme Court did yesterday says anything about unconstitutional laws being okay at all. So it's just this crazy fear-mongering thing that, ironically, if you don't give them complete and total power, then someone else is going to have complete and total power, is what they're trying to fear-monger you about. And it's not even possible under the rulings. And so the more infuriating part about it is that these are people that are getting millions of views on their tweets, and they're not even factually accurate. They're not even factually correct. But all these people are playing the moral high ground side, and they're not even factually correct about what they're saying.
You know what it does? It makes people feel something, though, Nate.
It does.
You know? That's the thing.
Let's see.
Wait, is that a leftist talking about small government?
Well, now they wanted small government.
Okay.
Now, but this could be more of a dumb bleep, which, by the way, we got to do dumb bleep of the week tomorrow because tomorrow's our last day of the week. Yeah. And we don't miss Dumb Bleep of the Week. So that's got to be tomorrow. If you're in the live group hanging out with us right now, make sure you get your submissions in for any dumb things that you've seen. Something tells me it's going to be dominated by a lot of things like this. Tristan Snell says, small government, original intent, limited federal power. That's what right-wingers said they wanted my entire life. Bullshit. They want to control everything, centrally run by a dictatorial president, immune from prosecution, and that's 100% un-American. So it's another just factually inaccurate thing, and we're going to go through. I reread the ruling this morning. And by reread, I mean I went through about 90 pages of the 120 pages, and I feel like that's enough. But President Biden says, each of us is equal before the law. No one is above it, not even a president. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, there are now virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a motherfucking lie. And I don't even agree with the ruling, but it's just a lie. And damn these people for putting us in the position once again that we have to defend Trump or conservatives or Republicans or whatever. But I'm so sick of them being so freaking dishonest about everything. That did not say that there are no limits on what a president can do. You still take these things into the courts and specific executive actions can be overturned. Just ask Biden. It's happened to him several times since he's been president and he tried to go around the Constitution to do things. That is still the case right now. You can still impeach and remove a president from office. You can still hold them criminally liable for unofficial acts, for things as well.
How many documents did they find in his various locations that were unsecured?
Several documents. And he got out of it because he's too old and feeble and senile. You think he's fighting to make sure he's held criminally liable for doing this thing? Yeah. No, like not at all. The same limits that we've had. Remember, this is the first ever criminal prosecution of a former president. Criminal prosecution. There's been civil prosecution, stuff like that, of a former president in U.S. history. So and it's not the first time that someone did something that was criminal. Clearly, every president does something that is criminal.
They were gonna prosecute Nixon, or at least impeach him, and so he resigned.
The government does things that's criminal all the time. They're able to do it because they are the government. They steal. Theft is a crime in the United States everywhere but in California, unless it's over $950. But
so is extortion.
Yeah, all these bribery. The government operates off of these things. They defraud people. They take their money and say they're going to do something with it, and they don't. They steal their money. They're immune from those things. Unlike you, if you steal money from someone without their consent, you can go to jail for it unless you're in California. Okay? They don't. They live off of stolen money. They murder people around the globe all the time. They've always been immune from it. Everyone has agreed with this, or we wouldn't have a government.
And if you try to expose any of their crimes, you're held under the Espionage Act.
Yeah. I need something to throw again.
They'll prosecute you for trying to expose.
There's a guy who exposed a president in administration in the government committing crimes.
And they put him in prison for 12 years.
He was in prison. Okay, so that's Assange.
That's Assange.
And then Snowden exposes this, and if he were brought here, he'd go to jail for the rest of his life. Yeah. Because we've decided we're not going to hold the government or the president criminally liable for the crimes they committed. Everyone almost has agreed on this, except for libertarians for the most part.
Right.
And for people to act like all of a sudden the government is this dictatorial power, this king, this monarchy that all of a sudden exists because of the Supreme Court ruling yesterday. It's got like I'm getting notification from my watch right now about this.
Yeah, it says loud environment. This could hurt my ears if I stay in this for 30 minutes or longer.
Here's a few passages from the ruling yesterday. The reasons that justify the president's absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for acts within the scope of his exclusive constitutional authority do not extend to conduct in areas where his authority is shared with Congress. There's another one. If the president does something that is also a duty, a power that Congress has, then he does not have immunity because he does not have exclusive authority, constitutional authority. There's something very unique about the office of the president, in that the office of the president is the executive branch. Like that's the executive branch, and then they can appoint a bunch of people under them, but it's begins and ends with them. Unless they have a way to blame something on someone else and that person gets in trouble. You know,
they're literally the CEO of America.
They are.
Yeah.
The actual CEO of America. Okay.
Go back, because I think this is important that they explain here to determine the president's immunity in this context. The court looks primarily to the framers' design of the presidency within the separation of powers, precedent on presidential immunity in the civil context, and criminal cases where a president resisted prosecutorial demands for documents. Basically, they're saying there's a historical precedent that says that presidents have received immunity in civil, and also they've been able to resist, as Biden has done, to turn over documents or recordings or whatever.
There was a civil case against Nixon that they cite several times.
Yeah.
And that's one they're talking about most of the time in here. Let's see. We're going to lay out some more stuff here. If the president claims authority to act, but in fact exercises mere individual will and authority without law, the courts may say so. Once again, President Biden said that the president can virtually do whatever they want now, according to this Supreme Court decision. That's not it at all. As he well knows, he has tried to do things that were outside of his authority, and the courts came in and said, nay, you cannot do that. Vax mandates and student loan forgiveness are two of the big ones that you can think about there. They cite this Youngstown, for instance. We held that President Truman exceeded his constitutional authority when he seized most of the nation's steel mills. But once it is determined that the president acted within the scope of his exclusive authority, his discretion. Okay, well, I didn't highlight that. So they cite Youngstown also. But of course, not all the president's official acts fall within his conclusive and preclusive authority. As Justice Robert Jackson recognized in Youngstown, the president sometimes, quote, acts pursuant to an express or implied authorization of Congress, or in a zone of twilight where he and Congress may have concurrent authority. The reasons that justify the president's absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for acts within the scope of his exclusive authority, therefore, do not extend to conduct in areas where his authority is shared with Congress. So once again, it's got to be the president's exclusive authority, the authority where he is he or she, that's gonna happen. He or she are the only person in the country with the authority to do this thing. That's it. Okay. So a big thing to remember here is that they only gave Trump immunity on one of the charges in the indictments. I think there were 4, but they only gave him immunity on one. It says, indeed, by the way, there was that was the one where he was talking to the DOJ, the Attorney General, I think it was Barr, and trying to pressure him to do something. Well, they said, well, that's in the executive branch. That's under the president's exclusive authority. He can get rid of that person. He can threaten to get rid of that person for any reason he wants to. That is his branch of government, and he can do whatever he wants with it. And so even the prosecution said that Trump was acting within his official authorities in doing that. They just claimed that it was wrong. Okay, so that's the only one that he got immunity on. There's also where he tried to set up the fake/alternate electors, whichever way you want to call it. He didn't get immunity on that. He got presumptive immunity, but they can still say that he didn't have the authority to do it. This goes back down to the district court. Okay, and in this decision, believe it's Roberts, points out that indeed the Constitution commits to the states the power to appoint presidential electors, quote, in such manner as the legislature thereof, the states, may direct. So they point out the fact that the president does not have the authority to appoint these electors. And then they send it back down to the district court to make this decision on whether or not he was doing official or unofficial conduct. Okay. Trump also made the argument, which I think we have brought up before too, that why didn't they impeach him on these offenses? He wasn't impeached on this. He wasn't tried. They didn't bring charges in Congress and try him in the Senate and convict him on some of these things that happened. So could they do it in criminal proceedings, federal criminal proceedings? And the Supreme Court says that's not the case at all. You do not have to be impeached and convicted for them to bring criminal charges against you. That's not a requirement. Mm-hmm. So this whole passage right here, Charlie, if you want.
Yeah, so Trump argued, so his team argued, that Trump asserts a far broader immunity than the limited one we have recognized. Again, right there, they're stating that that we're recognizing a very limited, specific immunity. He contends that the indictment must be dismissed because the impeachment judgment clause requires that impeachment and Senate conviction precede a president's criminal prosecution. Brief for Petitioner 16. The text of the clause provides little support for such an absolute immunity. It states that an impeachment judgment, quote, shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States, Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7. It then specifies that, quote, the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. So the clause both limits the consequences of an impeachment judgment and clarifies that notwithstanding such judgment, subsequent prosecution may proceed. By its own terms, the clause did not address whether and on what conduct a president may be prosecuted if he was never impeached and convicted.
Okay, let me see here. The implication of Trump's theory is that a president who evades impeachment for one reason or another during his term in office can never be held accountable for his criminal acts in the ordinary course of law. So if a president manages to conceal certain crimes throughout his presidency, or if Congress is unable to muster the political will to impeach the president for his crimes, then they must forever remain impervious to prosecution. Impeachment is a political process by which Congress can remove a president who has committed treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Transforming that political process into a necessary step in the enforcement of criminal law finds little support in the text of the Constitution or the structure of our government.
And what they're also saying there, too, is they're going back to the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, the framers designed to see in that particular clause, is there anything that supports saying that you cannot pursue any type of criminal prosecution unless an impeachment and conviction has been made. And what the court is saying is there's no support for that claim.
Yeah.
Like, we hear you. We hear what you're saying. We follow the logic, but there's no support for that claim whatsoever. This isn't mutually exclusive. They don't have to go together. One does not have to precede the other.
And they point out that if a president conceals crimes throughout his presidency, or if Congress isn't able to muster the political will to impeach him, it doesn't mean that they can't be prosecuted later on. So they're still opening the door and denying one of Trump's claims that he made. So let's see. As we've explained, when the president acts pursuant to his exclusive constitutional powers, Congress cannot, as a structural matter, regulate such actions, and courts cannot review them. Unless,
as I said before, Congress wants to impeach him.
Yeah.
Then Congress can impeach him for literally anything.
But they say in here, acts pursuant to his exclusive constitutional powers. So you say like an executive order, and we can just keep using something like vax mandates or student loan forgiveness or whatever the other executive orders that we've seen throughout the years. Did they act pursuant to exclusive constitutional powers? So those things can still be overturned afterwards. And it's kind of crazy. Like, this system of checks and balances and separation of powers that we have, it's like, I went to bed, I was reading this stuff last night. It's pretty ingenious, like the way that the framers drew this whole thing up. Like, so far, these safeguards have held up fairly well in one branch not being able to overrun the others, except for the Chevron thing and all the powers of the executive branch that have grown out of the whole administrative state, all the agencies, all those people. But they've done a pretty good job. I know it's not perfect. I know a lot of libertarians don't even like the Constitution at all, but it's the longest running Constitution that any countries have or have had, I'm pretty sure. And it's done a fairly good job so far restraining the government, although the government sucks and we should take away like 99% of the powers that they've given themselves throughout this time. Then they go on, which is always fun to see, they address the dissidents. So Sotomayor, Jackson, whoever the other one is, I can't remember the other person's name, but whatever. As for the dissidents, they strike a tone of chilling doom
Dissents.
dissents. I thought it said dissidents. Dissents. That makes more sense now.
Yeah, they're
but
dissenting.
They are dissidents.
Yeah,
you know,
in a way.
That's what I call her.
It's not wrong.
Yeah. As for the dissents, they strike a tone of chilling doom that is wholly disproportionate to what the court actually does today. Conclude that immunity extends to official discussions between the president and his attorney general, and then remand to the lower courts to determine, in the first instance, whether and to what extent Trump's remaining alleged conduct is entitled to immunity. That the first point there is really funny. That's all they did today. All they did was conclude that immunity extends to official discussions between the president and his attorney general. That was the only decision that was actually made in this whole thing.
And then they
directed the Trump case.
They directed the lower courts
Yeah.
to see whether or not the substance of that conversation was actually an official act or not.
Yeah. And those lower courts, by the way, they're not going to be super favorable to Trump. They haven't been thus far.
Now, when they make that decision, though, he can appeal that and go back to the Supreme Court.
And
if they decide to hear it,
they can decide whether or not it's official or unofficial afterwards. Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll see what they say. Like everyone else, the president is subject to prosecution in his unofficial capacity. But unlike anyone else, the president is a branch of government, and the Constitution vests in him sweeping powers and duties. Accounting for that reality and ensuring that the president may exercise those powers forcefully as the framers anticipated he would, does not place him above the law. It preserves the basic structure of the Constitution from which that law derives. They make some good arguments every now and then in this where you could see, I guess the idea, where a lot of libertarians would disagree is that we don't like the government in general. And a lot of their arguments are, well, for us to have this government, we're going to have some of these things, for the president to be able to operate. And we're like, yeah, but we don't think the president should be able to operate.
You know what I love most about the court is that they like eloquently call each other out in this thing. So Roberts continues on. I think it's Roberts writing the majority.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
He said the dissent's positions in the end boil down to ignoring the Constitution's separation of powers and the court's precedent, and instead fear-mongering on the basis of extreme hypotheticals about a future where the president, quote, feels empowered to violate federal criminal law. And it says that he's replying directly to Sotomayor. Then he replies to Jackson and says the dissents overlook the more likely prospect of an executive branch that cannibalizes itself with each successive president free to prosecute his predecessors, yet unable to boldly and fearlessly carry out his duties for fear that he may be next.
So it's a good point, and once again, as libertarians, I think we have a little bit of philosophical contradictions here, because when we're like, well, the president gets less and less power and they're scared to do anything.
Perfect.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good, I guess. I just want them to sign constitutional laws.
Yeah.
Like that's about it. But I do get the idea that what they're trying to stop here, as we see from the next page here, is that they're trying to go after the fact that we can't just have political prosecutions of every single president by the next president, that is actually going to destroy the country. And that's what they're actually worried about right now. And I want to point out the fact that I do think that this is a political prosecution. I think it's something that would have never happened if it were not Donald Trump, and that if he were not running for president, they would have never gone after him for this. And clearly everyone has ignored all the other likely crimes that all the other previous presidents have committed throughout the whole history of this country. Okay. And so the fact that the left decided to absolutely lose their ever-loving minds after Jan 6, after that whole thing happened, is why we had to take this all the way to the Supreme Court and decide that presidents have absolute immunity for their official acts and their constitutional duties. Had they not decided to pursue a political prosecution of their political opponent, unlike every other presidential administration throughout American history,
including Trump.
Yeah.
By the way,
good point.
Even though he could have.
Even though he said he's going to put Hillary in jail, stuff like that. She's not in jail. She didn't go to jail. Obama didn't go to jail. And so the fact that they did that,
Biden didn't go to jail,
is why we're dealing with this right now. And that's where you see this, what do you call this reverse victim offender thing?
Darvo.
Okay. Deflect.
Yeah. Deny or deflect. Yeah.
Okay.
And then avoid, and then reverse victim offender.
So I saw this tweet from Ilhan Omar. I didn't bring it up, but she says that we need a clear path here forward because people are scared. And I do get that sense reading through all the massive posts that have happened over the last day or so on Twitter, that some people are legitimately scared and some people are just making stuff up to score political points. But what's funny is they're now, because of this ruling, they're playing the victim card in this. And it's funny because the only reason we got this ruling was because they decided to prosecute their political opponent after he announced that he was going to run for president again. And so they decided to be the first people to ever decide to ever criminally prosecute their political opponent, and then waited until the election season for this to happen. And then this gets pushed all the way up to SCOTUS, who says, yeah, actually he's immune from like that one single thing that's in that indictment, and maybe some immunity from the other stuff. The lower courts are going to decide. And now they're the victims in this whole scenario, even though, kind of who started this whole thing is my question. They say Section 371, which has been charged in this case, is a broadly worded criminal statute that can cover, quote, any conspiracy for the purpose of impairing, obstructing, or defeating the lawful function of any department of government. Virtually every president is criticized for insufficiently enforcing some aspect of federal law. I don't know, maybe like immigration laws that haven't been enforced over the last few years. Okay. Yeah. An enterprising prosecutor and a new administration may assert that the previous president violated that broad statute. For instance, are we going to prosecute Biden for not enforcing certain immigration laws that are on the book? That would be a good question. Without immunity, such types of prosecutions of ex-presidents could quickly become routine. The enfeebling of the presidency and our government that would result from such a cycle of factional strife is exactly what the framers intended to avoid. Ignoring those risks, the dissents are instead content to leave the preservation of our system of separated powers up to the good faith of prosecutors.
And these are, by the way, these are lawyers. These are former prosecutors writing this opinion saying, look, we know, and I think Scalia did a really good job of this too, that talked about how we're leaving these decisions up to 9 lawyers. He's like, that we're lawyers. Mm-hmm. So he's basically calling themselves out, being like, yeah, we've never met a prosecutor he doesn't like to prosecute.
Well, they said an enterprising prosecutor.
Yes.
Like someone who wants to go out there and make some money,
or make a name for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they rise through the ranks. Maybe they can be a Supreme Court justice one day. Never met a hungry prosecutor not willing to prosecute for any reason whatsoever, and they can find something to prosecute you on if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, because there are so many federal and state statutes that you have violated.
You show me the man or woman, and I'll show you the law that they violated.
Exactly.
Today.
Yep.
So the president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law.
What?
But
hang on. Wait, Biden just said they were.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
What is this?
I don't know. It's crazy talk. But Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution. Okay, that is very important, in the same way that the president wouldn't be able to sign an executive order putting a member of Congress in jail for signing a law, voting yes on a law that Congress made. Okay, you're not going to criminalize something that is solely the duty of Congress either. Okay, although maybe they could because they'd have immunity, so I don't know. I'm kidding. That's just the thing that you say nowadays. Yeah. I don't know. The president, therefore, may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled, at a minimum, to a presumptive immunity from prosecution for all of his official acts. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. So this is
the Oval Office is capitalized, by the way. It doesn't mean that somebody, if you're in the Oval Office.
Yeah, just a person in there. No, the office holder.
Yes.
That thing. So Spike Cohen had this good tweet that kind of sums up the feeling that we have of the hypocrisy, the way that libertarians feel about this, the way that we feel about it. I know how like some like TDS libertarians might feel about some of this stuff, but I thought Spike's tweet was really good, and we'll finish with that.
All right. Spike tweets here. To be clear, the absolute immunity doctrine recognizes that in order for a government to function, its elected officials need to be immune from the harm they cause, as long as they're operating within their legal official duties. This is because government is a violent monopoly. If it was liable for the harm it caused, it could not function. If I thought the people who were upset about SCOTUS's decision were adopting Lysander Spooner's take on government, I'd be celebrating. Hopefully some of them are. But most of them are just mad because it's Trump being granted immunity. And that's true.
It's a good point, because the people that are so upset about this are not looking for a small, tiny, limited libertarian government. That is not what they're looking for. They're upset that maybe Trump might have immunity from these specific crimes, that they've hinged like their whole world on the idea that they were going to go after Trump and get him on some things. Okay. And so that's what they're actually upset. You think they're upset when Biden signs an order or tells one of his agencies to force everyone to go get a vaccine, or they have to be fired? Do you think, or they're going to find the business out of existence if they don't comply with him? Do you think the people that are upset about this decision were upset about Biden using that power? Are they upset about him unilaterally deciding to cancel $20,000 for the student debt for all these borrowers? By cancel, I mean transfer that debt onto other people who didn't take it out and force them to pay for it instead. And then he says it in a good way, which is that elected officials need to be immune from the harm they cause. Elected officials are out there every day causing harm to people in ways that if you or I did it, we would get in trouble for that. They are above the law, because I can't go steal from people. I can't go murder someone that I think is dangerous. Okay.
You can't go handcuff someone and put them in a cage.
No,
until you figure out what they did wrong.
No, I can't do that. I can't. I mean, just think about I can't endanger the welfare of a child like the government does with numerous different policies, because they destroy the economy, endanger the welfare of plenty of children out there. There's so many things. Every one of the things the government does, even if it has a positive benefit somewhere, has a negative benefit over here. Every one of them has a negative benefit. I don't know if that's the right way to say that or not. And so every time they do
negative consequence.
Yeah, negative consequence.
Even if there is a positive benefit.
So every time they do something, there is harm caused to someone. And so what they ruled is what we as libertarians might disagree with, because some of us are ANCAPs or anarchists or whatever, is that for this government to function, the government is going to have to be able to harm people. It's what governments do. And that's the government we have. It's the government that we were given. They were always able to harm people. Okay. And they can't be held criminally liable, or the government won't be able to function, because that's what governments do. We just won't have a government after that. That's why when we hear it, we're like, oh yeah, it sounds kind of good. I kind of do want them to be held criminal liable for everything. They're like, no, they won't be able to exercise all these powers over you. You're like, well, that does sound pretty good.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's what we want.
All right. The big deal is here, nothing really changed from a couple days ago, honestly, other than maybe Trump's going to get out of a couple of the charges, but not all of them. They're still going to be able to go through these charges. He's still going to get held liable for a bunch of things. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I just don't like it when people blow things way out of proportion.
And the gaslighting, the lying,
Yeah.
the manipulation, it's just absurd. You know, Biden, his speech should have been up there. He should have gone up there and just said, I hold myself in contempt. And then
End of line.
And then you'd be like, oh, I might vote for that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What honesty.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
If it like on his first day in office next term, he will imprison himself.
Yes.
I'll vote for him.
Yes.
I'll
I've
campaign
instructed the DOJ to investigate me
Yeah, exactly.
for my crimes that I've committed while a senator, a vice president, and a president.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I will suffer the consequences of that investigation.
That's not the case.
That's not going to happen.
Everything he's done, he wants to be immune from.
Exactly. All right, y'all, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, a family member, or foe. Leave us that rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We learned today, as we've always known, but we learned specifically that it does work. But people have found us through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Those reviews help get it to new people. So that's how you can share it. And go to godhatesfeds.com or joingml.com. That's the place where you can join the Fed Haters Club, be part of the, I think the best, I don't even think, I know. It's
That's
the
the
best liberty group of secret liberty insiders there ever could be. That's the Fed Haters Club. So goodmorningliberty.us, joingml.com, or godhatesfeds.com. Go to all of them. BernieLies.com, because he still does, even though we haven't talked about him in a while.
Yeah.
Go to all those things. Visit the links in our show notes to support the sponsors that support this show. If you do all of those things, then we'll be back again tomorrow for some dumb bleep of the Mother Truckin' Week, because it's an early America's birthday on the 4th. And so do all those things, or don't. I don't really care. We'll be back again tomorrow. Hope you have a good day and a good morning, Liberty. Nate's going to be late.